Welcome to our YouTube channel, My Infinite Retirement. And have you ever wondered what a living trust is, what a will is, and why you should have one? And actually, over 80% of people don't have one. And if you don't have one, it can create a lot of drama down the road. So my name is Daniela. I'm one of the co-founders of My Infinite Retirement. And I'm super excited to introduce you to our guest speaker here today. So joining us is Samuel Birdsong, and he has been an attorney for over a decade, and he's going to enlighten us on some of these really important topics. And so this is something that you really need to pay attention to, because if you don't, again, that can create a lot of chaos for the ones that are left behind. And by the end of this video, you have a clear understanding what trusts are, what wills are, and also why you need one and what can happen if you don't have one. And so also make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to be notified when we upload new videos. And so now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. And of course, I want to give him his proper introduction. So Samuel Birdsong is an estate planning attorney who draws upon his background in litigation, insurance, and investments to help his clients build plans that reduce the chance of litigation and increase the probability that their goals will be met or achieved after they're gone. And he lives and serves the Santa Clarita Valley, as well as the greater Los Angeles area and Southern California. So welcome, Samuel. We're really grateful to have you and excited to learn, what you have to share with us.
Thank you so much for having me here, Daniela. Excited to speak with you and just give everyone in the world out there some more information to help them plan more effectively.
Awesome. All right. Like I said, you're going to enlighten us, right? Cool. So let's get right into it. And we'll just start out with some really basic questions. What is a living trust and what is a will?
Okay. We'll start with the will first because I think everyone's familiar with that. We hear about wills all the time in television shows, movies, and really, this is probably the most common way that people will pass assets down from one person to the next. So a will is an expression of what your intentions are. So a simple will for most people is I leave everything to my wife or my husband, and if they're not around, I give it to my kids. And perfect. There's a clear instruction so that everyone knows exactly what you want to have happen to your assets after you're gone. A trust is something that's a little bit more complicated. It's a lot more powerful and flexible than a will, because where a will is designed to make sure that all the assets go from point A to point B, the trust allows you to exert some control over that. So you can structure the time and method that those assets are distributed. So if you have young children, you can say, well, I don't want them to receive everything at 18, but I want them to get a little at 18, 21, 25, or whatever terms make sense to you. So it really allows a person to keep control and make sure that the plan they have in mind is carried out to the most extent possible.
Mm-hmm. And so then which one is better? I mean, when would you recommend one versus the other?
To me, if you have young children under the age of 18, and you're planning for a situation where you're not going to be there to help shape who they are, a trust becomes very, very important. Because again, think back to when you were 18, 5 years ago, Daniela, if you were 18 and received a huge chunk of money because your parents are no longer here, would you have been responsible enough to manage that? Or would you have been an 18-year-old going crazy? And just all the money, everything your parents have spent their lifetime building is gone in months.
Hmm.
So
We
a
know the
trust,
answer to that. We know the answer
oh,
to that.
I would have gotten myself a Tesla Roadster, maybe that new plaid mode, because my God, that car is crazy. But yes, it wouldn't have been there to sustain me through college, through buying a home, through planning for marriage, or anything else that really is the legacy part that my parents would have wanted to instill, because that's exactly what they've given me because they're still here. So
Mhm.
with children under the age of 18, you have the ability to say, well, I want to put these correct people in charge, and I want the money that we've accumulated to go to our child when they're ready to handle it. So a little at 18, a little when they graduate from college, if that's important, maybe some money for when they're married, and then when they're mature enough and ready for that responsibility, then the rest of it is given to them, and now they have that pathway forward for adulthood. You can't do that with a will. The will is designed simply to give everything as quickly as possible to the beneficiaries named. So if you have someone under the age of 18, as soon as they turn 18, they get that lump sum of money gone. Uh,
Yeah, I've heard that happening. So wait a second. So if somebody's 18 and let's say they are a beneficiary of any type of investment or anything that's left behind, what happens if they're under 18? Are they able to get to that money?
so if someone's under the age of 18, it's a great question because, I kind of glossed over that.
Yeah.
If someone's under the age of 18 and their parent dies and the life insurance policy gets paid out or there's a retirement account that goes, under the age of 18, they can't really touch it. There's going to be some general rules that come into play. Whoever the guardian is in California, the guardian is the person that's responsible for that child under the age of 18. They're going to be given access to the money. And typically that's used for what attorneys will call HEMS, health, education, maintenance, and support. So that's making sure there's a roof over their head, food on the table, education expenses are paid for. But once that child reaches the age of 18, that guardianship expires. And unless there's another compelling reason to prevent that person from having access to the money, well, once they're 18, they're an adult. And now it's their responsibility and they are legally able to use that money however they see fit.
Okay, so that is with a will, right? So with a will, automatically when they're 18, it will transfer over the ownership will transfer over to that now adult child. But in a trust, you can kind of stretch it out and you can plan it out years beyond age 18 when they will be able to receive the money.
There are trusts that will be in place for adults in their 50s and 60s and 70s. When you talk about some of those legacy trusts,
Hmm.
one trust that my colleague is responsible for, the beneficiaries who do not have complete access to the money are in their 60s. So they are receiving the benefits from that trust, but the trust is being managed by attorneys and CPAs and financial advisors to make sure that that huge resource, that nest egg that was received, is providing a continual benefit for their lifetime. And once those beneficiaries pass away, then there's going to be a distribution to their children, so the creator's grandchildren. Now, this is a legacy sort of planning that has lasted almost 50 years of stability and guidance for the family. That's something a trust can easily accomplish, but a will can't.
Right. So a will is kind of immediate. So how is there like a limitation how far out you can stretch that legacy planning, or is there like an expiration date? Because you mentioned 50 years.
The longest that trusts are really allowed to do is we have in law we have a lot of weird rules, and one of the rules that we talk about is the rule against perpetuities, because there's an incentive for governments and states to receive money and not have money tied up in these trusts forever. So there's a measuring life. The youngest beneficiary at the time the trust is created, or once it becomes irrevocable. So let's say my parents created a trust that said once we die, this is going to last as long as our youngest grandchild plus 21 years.
Hmm.
That's the longest length of time that we can create with that, because there always has to be a measuring life to make sure that we don't have these dynasty trusts that last hundreds and hundreds of years and avoid a lot of the taxation and just we want that money to be circulating around in our communities.
Definitely. Wow, that's very interesting to know. So, and then now, what type of people would you recommend a trust versus a will? I mean, is there like a rule of thumb who should get one or the other, or should everybody get a trust? Should everybody get a will?
To me, it really comes down to the categories of do you have specific things that need a higher level of attention rather than just here, take the money and take the assets. If you're a person who's got adult children in their 30s and their 40s, they're responsible, they've found their adult life, and all you're going to be doing is saying, all I have is cash and investments. I just want you to receive that. A will could do that, although you can avoid a will. We should talk about that later, so that way that doesn't have to go into probate. If you've got very young children and you're worried about making sure that they're taken care of, and again, that they're responsible enough to handle the money when they receive it, a trust makes absolute sense because of that control element. Then if you've got large amounts of property, lots of real estate, and probate would be something to be almost punitive because of the mandatory fees that are associated with that. A trust makes sense for transferring these assets, bypassing probate, so that it's faster, it's cheaper, it doesn't tie up the assets. So really, unless you're in one of those extremes, if you have everything in your life it's just cash and you can transfer it outside of probate. That's, I think, the biggest goal for people where a trust makes the most sense.
Wow. So when you talk about transfers, so what kind of assets are we generally talking about? Homes, 401ks, and what else would be in that category?
Within a trust, homes in California are probably the best reason and the best example for why a trust should be used.
Mhm.
If you and your spouse own property together and you property owned as joint tenants, or even you and your siblings, you can own property as joint tenants, and that transfer will happen outside of probate. There's not a lot of issues with that. It's one of the most common ways that property is transferred. But if you're talking about parents going to children, having a trust facilitate that transfer is probably more efficient because there's so much less risk involved for the parents and the children alike. Um, I know we haven't really talked about probate, but there's a huge need to avoid probate just because probate's so inefficient and so expensive, and it's money that's being taken away from your children, from the beneficiaries you want to receive it, and you're tying up those assets in Los Angeles County for anywhere from 9 to 15 months if everything goes smoothly.
Wow.
So there's that huge delay of time. Something that people aren't necessarily aware of is that whenever an issue goes into probate court to administer a will, or if you don't have a will or a trust and it's passing through intestacy, if an attorney like me gets involved, we get paid a mandatory percentage of the assets. So if you have $1 million home,
Mhm.
I'm going to get paid a minimum of $23,000 just because of that home.
Just because.
Great.
Yeah.
And everything else you have that's in your estate, all your bank accounts, all of the other assets, the vehicles, everything else that gets appraised into there, all of that's being added onto the bill that the attorney gets guaranteed. So this is money coming out of what you've accumulated for your family, that's just going to some guy that happens to be there.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people don't notice. That was such great information. Thank you again, Samuel. Samuel is a true expert in his field. And we hope now that you have a better understanding what the difference is between a trust, between a will, and why it's so important to have one. And if you don't have one yet, make sure you get the ball rolling. And the best part, our interview with Samuel is not over yet. So we'll be back and we'll dive more into what is probate, how do you get a trust, and also the different types of trusts, because those are really important things that you need to know. And in the meantime, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the bell to be notified when we upload new videos, and also share this with your friends and family. And of course, don't forget, if you want to learn more about how to create your own infinite retirement plan, like your personal tax-free pension, then watch our masterclass. The link is below. All right, that's it for today. And remember, knowledge is power, but only once you apply it. All right, we'll see you next time.